after finding out my wife was cheating on me. I switched her birth control pills. Now she's pregnant by her lover, and she doesn't know what to do. I watched her every move as if it were the last piece of a puzzle, and the more she smiled, the more certain I became something was wrong. She thought she was in control. She had no idea what I already knew and what I was about to do. I was sitting in front of the TV, pretending to care about the baseball game. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Jane and I had just finished a roast beef she had prepared. While she washed the dishes, I stared at the screen, but my mind was far from there. Whenever she turned around, I observed her. She is a beautiful woman, not exactly a magazine cover model, but definitely someone who turns heads. Tall, curvy body, light brown hair falling in waves down her back. Her eyes, big and brown, had that way of looking at you that made you feel special. She always had that effect on me. We've been married for 7 years and have 2 little daughters, Nancy, 5, and Stella, 4. We both work full-time, so my mother takes care of the girls during the day. Jane and I pick them up after work. When Stella was born, I decided to get a vasectomy. We thought 2 kids were enough. But at that moment, my thoughts weren't on the girls, who were quietly playing in their room. My mind was occupied with the signs I'd been noticing in Jane over the past few months. It all started with small things. She began dressing more daringly, more put together. She also started spending more time at work. Taken separately, none of it seemed strange, but together, it left me uneasy. At home, her behavior also changed. When we watched TV and I made a comment, she would reply vaguely, as if she hadn't even heard me. Her eyes were on the screen, but her head was clearly elsewhere. In bed, our intimacy still existed, a few times a week, but on many nights, she tossed and turned before finally falling asleep. She seemed worried about something, but wouldn't say what, and I was afraid to ask directly. I feared that would only push her further away. We had always been very honest with each other. That's why I couldn't understand why. This time, she was hiding something. Jane had always been an excellent cook. She loved experimenting with new recipes, spending hours looking up ideas online. She often went on cooking forums, trading tips and learning from other cooks. I knew she used the nickname Janinha, a childhood diminutive her father used for her. I had seen her many times chatting in those cooking chat rooms. At first, I didn't think much of it. But over time, something inside me told me those conversations went beyond recipes. One night, while she was cleaning the table, an idea hit me. Why not log into that chat room myself? I could create a fake profile and see what she was talking about. I even thought about pretending to be someone else and striking up a conversation with her, just to see if she would admit anything. But after some reflection, I thought that was crossing a line. I didn't want to risk her finding out I was spying on her. Another week passed, and nothing changed. Jane remained distant, as if she lived in a world of her own. Even our daughters seemed to fight for her attention. That's when I decided I had to do something. The next day at work, I created a profile on the same platform she used. I picked the username Numami. I figured pretending to be a woman would make others more comfortable talking to me. I knew she usually logged into the chat around 8 p.m., after putting the girls to bed. So, that Tuesday, I waited for her to connect. I went into the little room next to the bathroom, where her computer was. I told her I was heading to my office to finish some work. She just nodded, distracted. I hurried down to the basement, where my home office was. Within minutes, I was logged into the cooking chat room. I waited for her username to appear. There were about 5 women connected, trading tips on the perfect cheesecake. 5 minutes went by, and I was still scanning for Janinha among the participants. Suddenly, one of the women messaged me, asking if I had any unique cheesecake recipes. I knew nothing about baking, so I replied that I had never made one, but I was there to learn from those who knew. While I was typing that response, I saw the name Janinha appear as the newest participant in the room. Everyone, including her, started giving me tips. What type of cheese to use, amounts, tricks to get the right texture. The room filled up quickly. Soon, there were 12 people talking at the same time, making it hard to keep track. I took advantage of a gap and asked Janinha to send me her recipe by email. I gave her an address I had created just for this moment. The next day, while I was at work, I found an email from her with the recipe. I was surprised. That email address was completely new, created only for that test. Jane had never hidden anything from me before, or at least that's what I believed. I spent the rest of the day feeling guilty. She could never find out that new mommy was actually her own husband. Even so, I decided to stick with the plan. The next day, I sent her an email saying I had tried the recipe and that the cake had turned out wonderful and that my husband had loved it. Soon, we began exchanging emails frequently. Later, we started talking outside of the cooking chat room. We added each other as friends on the platform, which allowed us to talk at any time, even outside the chat. Meanwhile, at home, her behavior with me and the girls started to get worse. Our intimacy also changed. It only happened once a week, and even then she seemed distant, as if she was only there out of obligation. Despite everything, we kept exchanging messages. Over time, I stopped feeling guilty, but I couldn't ignore the fact that our relationship was deteriorating. Jane was drifting further and further away, even from the girls. She was still a caring mother, but it was clear her mind was somewhere else. That's when I began to suspect. There was another man. Hiring a private investigator wasn't an option, nor could I follow her at work. I didn't know much about her office or her colleagues. Jane was a legal secretary at a large law firm. I worked at a bank. Our schedules were similar, which made any kind of surveillance difficult. One night, during one of our online conversations, I decided to steer things in a more personal direction. I told her my name was Lucy and that I lived in Florida. Jane replied that she lived in Texas and worked as a legal secretary, dealing with contracts and paperwork for the firm's lawyers. Then she asked me what I did for work. I made up a story that I was on maternity leave, but would soon be returning to my job as a bank teller. Jane got excited and said, "Wow, my husband also works at a bank. He's a programmer." Then she asked me, "What's your husband's name?" Things were going better than I expected. Jane was sharing real information. I replied that my husband's name was Lorenzo and that he worked in insurance sales. After that, we changed the subject, talked about cooking and other nonsense. I didn't want to push too hard that night, but I was already planning to bring up more intimate topics in our next conversation. For the next 2 days, we didn't manage to talk. On the third day, I sent an email saying that my bank manager had called me, asking me to return to work a week earlier than planned, and that I would also be getting a bonus for it. I said I was excited, but also nervous about going back to the routine. This gave me an excuse to keep the conversation going and continue gaining her trust. That's when I came up with a new plan. I decided to tell Jane a story. I wanted to make her believe that I had gotten involved with a co-worker at the bank. The idea was to create an environment of trust between Lucy and her, to see if she would also open up, especially if she really was cheating on me. One night, while we were chatting, Jane asked me why I was so anxious about going back to work. I replied, "I don't know if I should tell you this, but I need to get it off my chest. I just hope you don't think less of me after what I'm about to say." Jane answered quickly, "We all make mistakes. We're human. What is it? Did you take something from the bank?" I laughed at the comment to keep the tone light and answered, "No, it's not that. I met a guy at work, Roberto. We started out as friends, but things developed." I told her the whole fake story. An affair that supposedly lasted over a year with this Roberto guy. I said it all began with innocent after-work meetups that gradually became more intimate. I told her that being with him was exciting, but that I still loved my husband and that I didn't want to destroy my marriage over an affair. Jane read everything without interrupting, without asking questions. Honestly, as I wrote, I started to feel ridiculous. I was sure she didn't believe any of it. But then, her response caught me off guard. She asked, "But you just had a baby. Are you sure the father is your husband?" I pretended to be devastated by the question. I replied honestly, within the character, "Of course, I'm not sure. That's why I can never find out anything." I said I was feeling terrible and that I had to go, that I was too emotionally overwhelmed to keep talking. I ended the conversation, leaving that doubt in the air. That night, when I walked into the kitchen, I saw Jane sitting in front of the TV, but it was obvious she wasn't watching. Her gaze was distant, as if something very serious was weighing on her mind. I sat down beside her and held her hand. When she looked at me, I realized her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. After a brief exchange of words, she suggested we go to bed. That night, we made love. Afterwards, we stayed in each other's arms for over an hour before falling asleep together. While she slept, I lay awake, reflecting on our marriage and everything I had done. The next day, I began to wonder if that fake friendship I had created online with her was really serving any purpose. On the one hand, it had brought us closer that night, but on the other hand, I still hadn't discovered anything concrete. I thought maybe I needed to earn even more of her trust, until she felt comfortable enough to tell Lucy some secret. Over the weekend, Jane and I didn't talk in the chat, but on Monday, I sent her an email from work, pretending to be excited about a supposed conversation I'd had with Roberto. That night, after putting the girls to bed, I went down to the basement, turned on the computer, and waited for Jane to appear online. When she logged in, I wrote enthusiastically, "I'm so happy I can talk to you today. I have good news to share." Jane replied playfully, "Let me guess, it's about Roberto?" So I made up that Roberto was excited to get back in touch with me, that he seemed to still have feelings for me. She read the message and replied with some skepticism. If he really liked you, why didn't he call or try to see you all these months? I was already expecting that question. So I answered that calling was out of the question, that my husband had started getting suspicious and was checking the phone bills. I also said Roberto didn't want to risk being discovered. We talked for about 30 more minutes. Even though I tried to highlight how special Roberto supposedly was, I could tell Jane wasn't at all impressed with his character I had created. On Wednesday, Jane logged in again, and this time, the conversation took a completely different turn. After a few minutes, she started opening up and finally admitted it. She was involved with another man, a lawyer, her boss. His name was Jessen, married, and with a child. My heart sank. I had heard her mention the name Jessen before, but she hadn't spoken of him for months. Now I understood why. According to her, everything had started almost a year earlier, during a work trip to a convention in Atlanta. Until then, I had believed Jane had gone with another secretary. Now, I realized it had also been a lie. Jane said that, on the first night in Atlanta, after a group dinner, Jessen invited her for drinks at the hotel bar. That night ended in his room. The next day, she still felt guilty, but even so, they repeated the experience. They spent another night together. When she came back home, she stayed away from Jessen for a few weeks, but eventually gave in to his persistence. They restarted the affair. Over time, they began using Jessen's office after hours to be together. Later, they started meeting at a hotel once a week, sometimes even more. She confessed the affair had been going on for over a year, and that they met 3 to 4 times a week, more often than she and I were intimate. The anger I felt reading all of this is indescribable. I remembered all the countless times Jane had made excuses not to be with me. Now I knew that with Jessen, she never refused. She was always willing, always excited. I asked if she felt anything for him. The answer was immediate. No, I don't love him. I love my husband. But the physical connection with Jessen is like an addiction that destroyed me. How could she say she loved me while betraying our family so shamelessly? When the conversation ended, I was emotionally drained. I said goodbye, telling her my baby was crying and that I needed to go, promising we would talk again in a few days. I shut down the computer, but my mind was boiling. How could she live this double life? Saying she loved me, taking care of our daughters, and at the same time sharing something so intimate with another man? The thought of Jessen enjoying the best of Jane, while I suffered in silence, filled me with rage. That's when I made my decision. I was not going to forgive her. Our marriage was over, and the only possible revenge would be to fight for custody of our daughters. If Jane lost the girls, that would be the most devastating punishment of all. My goal was now clear: divorce her, win full custody, and move away with the children, even if it meant going to another state. Jane needed to pay for what she had done to our family. I had already decided. I would also inform Jessen's wife about the affair. And I was seriously thinking about taking legal action against Jane's workplace, because I felt that environment had directly contributed to the destruction of my marriage. But before anything else, I needed concrete proof of what was happening. I kept acting normally around her, pretending nothing had changed, while she continued immersed in her secret life, unaware of how much my pain kept growing. It had already been 2 days since my last conversation with her under the guise of Lucy. That morning, I sent her an email asking if she would be available to talk later. She replied yes, and we agreed on the usual time. I had a list of questions prepared. I knew the answers would hurt, but I needed to understand what she really felt for Jessen, and, most importantly, what her intentions were with that relationship. That night, my computer was already on before the girls even went to sleep. As soon as Jane logged in, I greeted her. She replied with relief. "It's so good to talk to you again. I can't stop thinking about our last conversation. I hope my words didn't make you think badly of me." I answered quickly. "Who am I to judge you? We're human. Talking to you has helped me." Jane replied, "I don't have anyone else to share this with. I always told my husband everything. But this subject is completely off limits." She gave a nervous laugh and continued, "Do you think he suspects anything? And you, what do you think?" I asked. "No, he has no idea. He trusts me completely. If he ever found out, I would lose everything. He can be pretty intense when he's angry, and I don't want to provoke him." I took the chance to ask, "You mentioned your husband had a vasectomy after your youngest daughter was born. Aren't you afraid of getting pregnant by Jessen?" She replied with confidence, "That's not a problem. I've been on birth control ever since things started with Jessen. I keep them well hidden." She even explained in detail how she did it. She took the pills every morning while her husband was in the shower. Then she hid them inside a shoebox in the bedroom. As I read that, I felt a mix of disgust and rage. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was bragging about it to her virtual friend. So I asked the main question, "Are you thinking about leaving your husband for Jessen?" Her answer came quickly. "No, that's never going to happen. I love my husband. I love my family. I don't want to abandon them." I was horrified by the ease with which she spoke of her own betrayal. She seemed to treat the affair with Jessen like it was a game, as if she wasn't aware of the damage she was causing. I pressed further. "Don't you think you're neglecting your husband? He must be feeling left out." There was a long silence before she replied. "We still have intimate moments. Less frequent. It's true, but I don't think he cares. He knows I love him." I couldn't take it and push a little more. "And aren't you afraid that, with so much distance, he might end up seeking affection somewhere else?" This time, her response took even longer. "No, I never thought about that. Now you've made me worried." As the conversation went on, Jane seemed almost excited when she told me about a trip she was planning with Jessen to Ireland, something she had never once mentioned at home. That night, when we went to bed, neither of us could sleep. I was far too furious to say anything, and she seemed restless. She kept tossing and turning in bed. I could tell something was weighing on her conscience, or maybe it was just the anticipation of the trip with her lover. I decided I would talk to her the next day. On Saturday morning, while we were having breakfast at the kitchen table, I brought up the subject firmly. "Have you noticed how much our intimacy has dropped over the past few months? We went from several times a week to almost nothing. It's been almost 2 weeks since the last time. What's going on? Are you with someone else?" Jane froze. She stopped with a fork suspended in the air. She was visibly shocked by the direct question. In 7 years of marriage, I had never confronted her like that. After a few seconds, she replied, "That's extremely offensive, Jack." Whenever she called me Jack, it was because she was angry or wanted to emphasize something. Her eyes were full of reproach. "How can you question my loyalty after all these years?" I juggle work and home every single day. It's only natural for our sex life to cool down over time. It's unfair for you to suggest otherwise. I tried to stay calm and answered, I'm not accusing you of anything, but you've changed. This whole past year, even our daughters noticed. They hardly go to you with their problems anymore. Now they come to me. That made her furious. Her response came like an attack. I only have 24 hours in a day. I can't handle everything. You should step in too. But then her expression changed. It was as if, suddenly, she realized what she had just said, as if she noticed that, for a second, she had treated her daughters like a burden. Her face shifted from anger to remorse. She abruptly stood up from the table and walked off toward the bedroom. I decided to drop the subject for the time being. It was clear that any attempt at conversation in that moment would be useless. That afternoon, Jane went out for her weekly shopping, a routine thing for her. But I suspected that in reality, she was looking for something new to take on her trip with Jesson to Ireland. With her out of the house and the girls playing in their rooms, I took the opportunity to search for birth control pills she had mentioned to Lucy. It took a few minutes, but I finally found them. They were exactly where she had said, hidden inside an old shoebox in the closet, inside a small plastic case. There was one pack in use and several sealed ones. That confirmed she had been taking the pills for a long time, the same length as her affair with Jesson. I felt a mixture of sadness, anger, and pity. How could the woman I loved so much betray me like this? Where was the person I had married 7 years ago? I held the case for a few minutes, reflecting on the future of our family. It was clear the marriage was over, but I knew I couldn't allow my daughters to be under Jane's exclusive care. The sadness I felt gave way to despair, and then to an uncontrollable desire for revenge. A plan began to form in my mind. A dark plan. Something I would never have considered under any other circumstances. But bitterness and fury consumed me. Carefully, I removed one of the pills from the blister pack and took it with me when I dropped the girls off at my mother's house. Then I went to a pharmacy and spent over half an hour searching for what I needed. I bought 2 types of pills, a children's medicine and a round white tablet used for liver problems, both similar in size to the pills Jane was taking. That night, I compared the medications with the original birth control pills. The children's pill was practically identical, only a bit thicker. So I replaced all of her active pills with the children's tablets. Then I put everything back in place and went to pick up the girls at my mother's house, hoping they wouldn't mention our visit. The following Tuesday, Jane told me she would be attending a conference in Ireland and that she would be traveling with a co-worker without giving any names. While she was gone, she didn't call even once to check on the girls, not even to talk to me. It was as if she didn't care. The day after she left, I went to a payphone and called her office. I asked for Jesson. They said he was also out of town and wouldn't be back until the following week. There was no doubt anymore. They were together. When Jane came back, she greeted me with a hug as if nothing had happened. That night, after putting the girls to bed, she took me to the bedroom and tried to initiate something intimate. I refused. I told her I had a headache and was tired from work. She insisted, tried to be seductive, but I refused again. In the end, she was offended and turned her back. I kept wondering if that behavior was guilt. Maybe for not calling while she was away, or an attempt to make up for what she had said about the girls. But her gesture felt more like a performance to patch things up than any genuine desire for intimacy. It disgusted me. In the following days, I continued our conversations as Lucy. I pretended that my relationship with the fictitious Roberto had become active again. I invented stories of passionate encounters to provoke Jane, hoping she would reveal more details about her affair with Jesson. And it worked. Jane started telling me things she had done with Jesson, things she had never done with me. She even gave me tips and suggestions of what I could try with my lover. Every detail was like a punch to the gut. Her actions contradicted every "I love you" she ever said to me. Meanwhile, I monitored her pills daily. I watched the number go down in the dispenser, one by one, without her ever suspecting. A few weeks after her trip, Jane began acting differently. She was more attentive to me and the girls. She seemed more present, more affectionate at home. But after just a few more weeks, everything changed again. One afternoon, she came home from work visibly shaken. When I asked what happened, she broke down crying and locked herself in the bedroom. My suspicions were confirmed. She was pregnant. I discovered she had stopped taking the pills in the last 2 days, probably after realizing she was pregnant. Calmly, I switched the fake pills back with the real birth control ones I had kept in my office, in case she tried to check or question the medication. Things began spiraling out of control very quickly. I knew it wouldn't be long before the consequences of her betrayal came crashing down. Jane, however, did not confess. Neither the affair nor the pregnancy, even with my attempts to make her talk. If she had admitted it at that moment, maybe I would have chosen another path. But her silence only reinforced my determination to go through with my revenge. Keeping my facade intact, I continued gathering evidence. My goal was clear: to sue the firm where she worked for contributing to the collapse of our marriage. At the same time, I was curious to see if Jane would share the news of the pregnancy with her friend Lucy. One night, I saw Jane at the computer after putting the girls to bed. I rushed down to the basement, turned on my computer, and logged in to talk to her. During the conversation, she told me details about the trip to Atlanta. She even bragged about how much she had enjoyed those days with Jessen. She admitted they had spent most of the time in intimate moments. I took the opportunity to ask if she ever considered leaving her husband for Jessen. Jane was emphatic in saying she would never leave me because she loved me. She insisted her involvement with Jessen was purely physical, without any emotional connection. But what surprised me the most was when she said she wanted to end the affair with Jessen and go back to being a devoted wife. Still, she never mentioned anything about the pregnancy. Did she really think everything could go back to the way it was? Did she believe that a year of betrayal and of denying affection and intimacy could simply be erased? That night, as Jane slept beside me, I knew I was crossing the point of no return. Something had to change, and soon. A few days later, Jane finally told Lucy that she was pregnant by Jessen. She said the two of them had decided to go to a private clinic for an abortion. She explained they would be traveling in 2 weeks, and that she would be gone for a few days to recover after the procedure. I saved every detail of the conversation, already thinking of how I would use it against her. The next day, I took a day off work and went to clinic, about an hour away. I posed as Jane's husband and managed to confirm the appointment schedule for the 14th of that month. I even obtained a written confirmation, stamped by the clinic. A week later, while we were having dinner, Jane told me she would have another important conference in Ireland. She said she would be away for 2 nights. She also said it would be her last business trip. I didn't react as she expected. Maybe she found my silence strange. But I already knew the affair with Jessen was coming to an end, and her decision to stop traveling only confirmed it. On Wednesday the 14th, Jane left early. She gave me a goodbye kiss before heading to the airport in her Toyota. I knew she would leave the car there and travel with Jessen to another state. As soon as she left, I got in my car and drove straight to the clinic. I parked in a strategic spot with a clear view of the entrance. I drove within the speed limit, knowing they would still meet at the airport first. When they arrived, I managed to take clear photos of the two of them entering the clinic together. I waited until they were completely inside, and then I left without being seen. 3 days later, Jane was back. She came home looking exhausted and was surprised to see me there so early. But at that point, everything was already set in motion. During her trip, I had spoken to my lawyer and visited the firm's office where she worked. I requested a meeting with the president of the firm and told him everything: the extramarital affair, the pregnancy, the visit to the clinic. I made it clear that I planned to divorce Jane, sue Jessen, and also take action against the company for allowing a relationship between boss and subordinate. The president asked for a day to consult the legal department and open an internal investigation. They interviewed other secretaries, checked my claims. In the end, we reached a settlement. The firm agreed to pay me $500,000 to avoid a lawsuit, and they fired both Jessen and Jane. With that in hand, I filed for divorce. I also requested a restraining order, preventing Jane from approaching me or our daughters during the process. I included in the filing a letter making it clear. If she contested the terms of the divorce, I would fight for full custody and ensure she would no longer have any access to the girls. When Jane came home, she still knew nothing. "You got home early today?" she asked, surprised. I answered calmly. "I took the day off. We need to talk. And that's why I also didn't pick up the girls from my mother's house." Jane frowned, worried. "What's so urgent that you miss work?" So I told her that a few weeks earlier, while changing a light bulb in the closet, I had accidentally knocked over a box, and its contents caught my attention. I placed a shoebox with a dispenser of birth control pills on the living room table and asked her for an explanation. Jane dropped her purse to the floor. Her face went pale instantly. For a moment, she showed genuine surprise. But soon, her expression turned to panic. She collapsed onto the couch, covered her face with her hands, and began rocking back and forth like a lost child. She was truly devastated. Calmly, I continued. "So my loyal and faithful wife, care to explain these pills? Why would you be afraid of getting pregnant if you know I had a vasectomy after our second daughter? Unless, of course, you've been unfaithful." "I can explain," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes full of tears. She was sobbing, her hands visibly shaking. But I didn't let her pleas distract me from my focus. "Tell me, did you cheat on me? Were you unfaithful? Because everything points to that. And now you think you can justify this betrayal." My voice was firm. "No, it's over. I've always loved you," she replied through tears. "There must be a way to fix this." Her face was covered in tears. "How can you say you love me if you had an affair? If you broke our vows? If you betrayed our family?" She then began a confession, a watered-down version of the truth. She talked about the affair with Jessen, but claimed she had ended everything during that last business trip. She went silent, as if waiting for me to believe her lies. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Business trip? How curious. And here I was thinking your last trip was to a clinic to have an abortion." Her mouth opened in shock. Her eyes reflected pure fear. "Yes, Jane, I know everything. But would you mind telling me if I miss any detail?" She tried to answer, but no coherent words came out. Suddenly, she ran to the bedroom, crying. I stood in the living room, debating whether I should follow her. I was afraid she might do something reckless, but I decided to wait. Jane stayed locked in the bedroom for almost 2 hours, crying. Then she showered and came out dressed in a long dress. Her face carried the weight of shame, the marks of real suffering. She sat at the kitchen table, unable to look me in the eyes. "I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything to fix this," she said, her voice breaking. "I think it's too late, darling," I replied, remembering all the months I had tried to get close again while she saved her affection for Jessen. "I did everything you asked, and yet you denied me what was mine by right. You tainted the love I had for you, Jane. Now, there's almost nothing left." Jane broke down. She buried her face in her arms on the table. "Please, forgive me. Tell me you still love me," she pleaded in a soft, desperate tone. I insisted that she tell me everything. I wanted to know the identity of the lover, how they met, what they did together. Jane finally confessed, and every word matched what I already knew. The affair with Jessen, the pregnancy, the abortion, the meetings at the firm and the hotels. The rest of the weekend was heavy silence. On Monday morning, Jane received the divorce papers at work. Shortly after, the firm's president called her in, along with Jessen, to inform them that both were fired. The restraining order prevented Jane from coming back home. She called me at noon. She was devastated. Before ending the call, I informed her I would deliver her clothes to her mother's house, since there was no reason for her to return to ours. I changed all the locks. I later learned that Jane had a nervous breakdown after that conversation. She was hospitalized. 2 weeks later, she accepted the terms of the divorce. We agreed that she could visit the girls for a few hours on Saturdays at my mother's house. Months later, our marriage was officially dissolved. Over time, Jane seemed to sink into depression. Her mother told me she was in therapy, that she had lost weight and hardly left the house. Gradually, I allowed more access to the girls, unsupervised visits, some weekends at their grandmother's. But when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, she could no longer care for the girls during my work hours. Jane offered to take on that responsibility. I refused. I was afraid of the emotional impact on the girls and of a forced reconciliation. In the end, I hired a nanny to help me. A year later, I started a relationship with Megan, a co-worker, a widow with no children. My daughters adored her. She had already been visiting us frequently, and she was naturally accepted as a maternal figure. Nowadays, I hardly ever see Jane. I know she still lives with her mother. Deep down, I wish I knew nothing more about her. But until our daughters are of age, Jane will remain an uncomfortable presence in the background of my life. Either way, as long as she never sets foot in my house again, I don't care what she does with her life. Comment: this story is both shocking and tragic. It shows how betrayal corrodes trust and pushes people into extreme actions they would never have imagined themselves capable of. What began as suspicion slowly turned into obsession, deception, and ultimately revenge. The saddest part is that two innocent children were caught in the middle of a destructive spiral caused by their mother's betrayal and their father's thirst for justice. In the end, no one really wins. Everyone is left with scars.